The fire devoured everything Lillian Vance had ever known, her family's homestead crumbling into ash as she watched from the hillside, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her face. She hadn't been able to save anything, not her father's pocket watch, not her mother's wedding dress, not even a single photograph to remember them by. All she had were the clothes on her back, her sister's trembling hand in hers, and the faint hope that someone in Lordsburg might take pity on two orphaned young women with nothing but their names. Lillian pulled her sister closer as the wind shifted, carrying embers toward them. At 18, she was now responsible for 16-year-old Mary, who hadn't stopped shaking since the raiders came. The outlaws had taken everything: their livestock, their supplies, what little money their father had hidden beneath the floorboards before setting fire to the ranch house with deliberate cruelty. "We can't stay here," Lillian whispered, though there was no one to hear but Mary and the howling New Mexico wind. "We need to reach town before nightfall," Mary's voice cracked. "How? It's 10 miles at least, and we have nothing. No horse, no wagon." The sound of approaching hoofbeats made both sisters stiffen with terror. Lillian pushed Mary behind her, ready to face whatever new threat approached, though she had no weapon, no means of defense. A lone rider emerged from the swirling dust, his silhouette backlit by the setting sun. As he drew closer, Lillian could make out broad shoulders, a weather-beaten hat pulled low, and the gleam of a rifle across his saddle. "Stay back," she called, her voice stronger than she felt. The rider pulled his horse to a stop, raising one hand to show he meant no harm. "Saw the smoke from miles away," he said, his voice deep and rough, like he wasn't accustomed to using it much. "Name's Virgil O'Malley. I work the Circle M ranch east of here." His eyes moved past them to the smoldering ruins. "Your place?" Lillian nodded, not trusting her voice anymore. "Raiders." He asked. 4 men, she managed. "They took everything before they burned it." Virgil O'Malley dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping a respectful distance. Up close, Lillian could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with intense green eyes that stood out against his sun-darkened skin. A jagged scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into the stubble of his beard. "You folks have somewhere to go." Mary pressed closer to Lillian. "Our parents are dead," she said, her voice small. "We were heading to Lordsburg." Virgil nodded once, decisive. "It'll be dark soon. Not safe for you to walk it." He glanced at his horse, a sturdy palomino that pawed at the ground impatiently. "My ranch is closer. You can stay there tonight. Head to town in the morning when it's safer." Lillian hesitated. They had no reason to trust this stranger, but they had even less reason to refuse his help. Without food, water, or weapons, they wouldn't last the night in the open desert. "Why should we trust you?" she asked. Virgil's expression didn't change. "You shouldn't. But I gave my word to my mother before she died that I'd never turn away someone in need." He paused. "I can take you both to town now if you prefer, but it's a hard ride in the dark, especially doubled up." Lillian looked at Mary's exhausted face, then back to the still-burning homestead. Their father had always told them to trust their instincts. Something about this quiet, scarred cowboy felt solid, dependable. "We'll go with you," she decided, "but just for tonight." Virgil nodded, seemingly neither pleased nor displeased by her decision. He led his horse closer. "Name of the horse is Copper. He's steady, won't give you any trouble." He cupped his hands to help Mary mount first, then Lillian, before swinging up behind them with surprising grace for a man his size. "Hold tight," he instructed, and with a soft click of his tongue, they were moving, riding through the ashes of Lillian's former life, the two women balancing precariously in front of the mysterious cowboy, the promise of tomorrow waiting just over the hill. The journey to Virgil's ranch took nearly 2 hours, the palomino carefully picking its way across the darkening landscape. Lillian sat rigid, acutely aware of the stranger at her back, while Mary eventually slumped against her, overcome by exhaustion. "Not much farther," Virgil said as they crested a small rise. Below them stretched a modest but well-maintained ranch. A two-story house stood at its center, flanked by a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. A small creek cut through the property, catching the last light of day. "It's not much," he said, almost apologetically, "but it's mine." As they approached, a dog began barking and a figure emerged from the house carrying a lantern. As they drew closer, Lillian was surprised to see an older woman with silver-streaked black hair. "Virgil O'Malley, what in heaven's name?" the woman called out, holding the lantern higher. "I expected you back hours ago, and here you come with—" She broke off, taking in the sight of the two soot-streaked women. "Rosa, these ladies need our help," Virgil explained as he dismounted and helped first Mary, then Lillian down. "Raiders burned them out. This is Miss," he paused, realizing he'd never asked their names. "Lillian Vance," she supplied, "and my sister Mary." Rosa's weathered face softened instantly. "Lord above, you poor things. Come inside this minute." She glared at Virgil. "You take care of that horse while I see to these girls. They need food and hot water, not to be standing around in the night air." Virgil touched the brim of his hat. "Yes, madam," he said, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips as he led Copper toward the barn. Rosa bustled them into the house, which was simple but clean and warmly lit. "Sit, sit," she insisted, gesturing to chairs at a large wooden table. "I'm Rosa Mendoza. I've been housekeeper here since Virgil was in short pants." She moved efficiently around the kitchen, stoking the fire in the cookstove and putting on a kettle. "You'll have soup and bread first, then baths. I've got clean nightclothes you can borrow." "Thank you," Lillian said, emotion suddenly overwhelming her. "We don't want to be a burden." Rosa waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. This house has seen too little female company since Virgil's mother passed 5 years ago. His father followed her a year later." She ladled thick soup into bowls. "The boy works too hard, speaks too little, and needs someone to remind him there's more to life than cattle." Mary stirred, looking around the kitchen with wide eyes. "This is a nice place," she ventured. "Our home wasn't nearly so big." "The O'Malleys built it with the future in mind," Rosa said, setting bread and butter on the table. "Virgil was supposed to have brothers and sisters, but Mrs. O'Malley had complications after his birth. She couldn't have more children." Lillian felt a pang of sympathy as she sipped the soup rich with beans and chilies, warming her from the inside out. "You've known him his whole life then?" "Since the day he was born," Rosa confirmed. "I delivered him myself when the doctor couldn't get here in time." She glanced toward the door. "He's a good man. Quiet since he came back from the war, but good to the bone." Lillian was about to ask more when the door opened and Virgil stepped in, removing his hat. He'd washed up, his dark hair damp at the temples, the scar on his jawline more prominent in the lamplight. "Ladies," he acknowledged, hanging his hat on a peg. "Hope Rosa's taking good care of you." "They're just having something to eat before their baths," Rosa informed him. "Then they're taking the guest room. You can sleep in the barn." Virgil raised an eyebrow but didn't protest. "Fine by me." He accepted the bowl Rosa handed him and sat at the far end of the table. "I'll ride into town tomorrow. Let Sheriff Matthews know about the raid. See if he can track those men." Lillian watched him eat, noting how he kept his eyes on his food, offering them privacy even in the shared space. "Do you think they'll catch them?" she asked. Virgil looked up, meeting her gaze directly for the first time. "Hard to say. Sheriff's a good man, but the territory's big. Those raiders could be halfway to Arizona by now." He hesitated. "Did you recognize any of them?" Lillian shook her head. They wore bandanas over their faces. One had a scar across his forehead, visible above the cloth. Another wore silver spurs with stars on them. Virgil nodded, filing away the information. That might help. The one with the spurs could be Pete Dawson. He rides with the Benson gang sometimes. The Benson gang, Mary's voice quavered. I've heard stories. Most are true, Virgil said grimly. They've been raiding ranches from here to Santa Fe. Sheriff's been trying to catch them for months. Rosa clucked her tongue. Enough talk of outlaws tonight. These girls need rest, not nightmares. She stood, collecting empty bowls. Baths are next. Virgil, go bring in water from the pump. He rose without complaint, disappearing outside with 2 large buckets. When he returned, Rosa shooed him away to the parlor while she prepared the bath in the kitchen, hanging blankets for privacy. Later, clean for the first time in what felt like ages and dressed in borrowed nightgowns, Lillian and Mary were shown to a comfortable bedroom upstairs. Rosa had turned down the covers and left a lamp burning low. Sleep as long as you need, she told them. Breakfast will wait. Left alone, Mary crawled into bed, falling asleep almost instantly. Lillian moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit landscape. She could make out Virgil's figure, walking slowly around the perimeter of the house, rifle in hand. Standing guard, she realized, protecting them from dangers that might follow. For the first time since the raid, something other than fear flickered in her chest, a small, fragile feeling of safety. She watched Virgil complete his circuit and settle on the porch steps, his dog curled at his feet, both of them alert to the night. Lillian finally slipped into bed beside her sister. Her last thought before sleep claimed her that perhaps tomorrow wasn't just waiting over the hill, perhaps it was already here, in this unexpected sanctuary. Morning came with the scent of coffee and bacon. Lillian woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. Mary still slept soundly beside her, so Lillian dressed quietly in her soot-stained clothes, grimacing at their condition. Downstairs, she found Rosa at the stove and Virgil at the table, studying a map spread before him. "Good morning," Lillian said, suddenly self-conscious. Virgil stood immediately. "Morning, Miss Vance. Hope you slept well." "Better than I expected to," she admitted. "Thank you again for your hospitality." Rosa pressed a cup of coffee into her hands. "Sit and eat, child. You're too thin already." Virgil refolded the map. "I'll be riding into Lordsburg after breakfast. Do you and your sister have people there?" Lillian shook her head. "Not exactly. Our father mentioned a Mrs. Hollister who runs a boarding house. He said she might help us find work if anything ever happened." "Abigail Hollister," Virgil nodded. "Good woman, strict but fair." "You know her?" Lillian asked, surprised. "Lordsburg isn't that big," he replied. "Mrs. Hollister serves the best apple pie in the territory during the Harvest Festival." It was such an ordinary detail, a man who appreciated good pie, that Lillian felt a smile tug at her lips for the first time since the raid. "I can make a decent apple pie myself," she said. "My mother taught me." Something in Virgil's expression softened. "That's so. Well, Mrs. Hollister might hire you on that skill alone." Rosa placed a plate of eggs and bacon before Lillian. "Eat now, talk later." Mary appeared in the doorway then, looking younger than her 16 years in the borrowed nightgown. Rosa immediately ushered her to the table, fussing over both sisters with motherly attention. As they ate, Virgil outlined his plan. "I'll ride to town first, speak with the sheriff. Then I'll find Mrs. Hollister, see about arrangements for you both." He hesitated. "Unless you'd prefer to come along." Lillian considered the options. Going to town meant facing their new reality immediately, 2 young women alone without resources. Staying at the ranch meant delay, but also another day of safety and recovery. Perhaps it would be better if you spoke to Mrs. Hollister first, she decided. Mary and I could use another day to gather ourselves. Virgil nodded, seemingly relieved by her decision. Sensible. I'll return by nightfall with news. After breakfast, Virgil prepared to leave while Rosa revealed that she'd been washing the sisters' clothes while they slept. They're hanging to dry now, she explained. In the meantime, I found some things that might fit you. The things turned out to be dresses that had belonged to Virgil's mother, simple, but well-made garments that Rosa had preserved carefully. Mrs. O'Malley was about your size, she told Lillian. She'd want them worn rather than sitting in a trunk gathering dust. Lillian fingered the soft calico of a blue dress. Are you certain these are family heirlooms? Rosa's eyes twinkled. I already asked Virgil, he said, and I quote, whatever they need is theirs. Dressed in Mrs. O'Malley's clothes, Lillian went outside to see Virgil off. He was checking Copper's saddle when she approached. Thank you, she said simply. For everything. Virgil paused, turning to face her. For a moment he seemed unable to look away, something unreadable passing through his eyes as he took in the sight of her in his mother's dress. You don't owe me any thanks, he finally said, his voice rougher than usual. Anyone would have done the same. No, Lillian said with certainty. They wouldn't have. He cleared his throat, adjusting his hat. I should reach town in about 2 hours. I'll be back before dark. He mounted Copper in one fluid motion. Rosa will look after you. You're safe here. With that, he rode away, a solitary figure against the vast New Mexico landscape. Lillian watched until he disappeared over the rise, wondering why the ranch suddenly felt emptier without a man she'd known for less than a day. The hours passed surprisingly quickly. Rosa put the sisters to work helping with household chores, not as a payment, she insisted, but to keep their minds occupied. Mary seemed to brighten as she helped gather eggs and feed chickens, while Lillian assisted with baking bread and churning butter. You're good in the kitchen, Rosa observed. Your mother taught you well. Lillian felt her throat tighten. She did. Cooking, sewing, keeping house. She said a woman should know how to make a home wherever she found herself. Wise woman, Rosa nodded. And what did your father teach you? To read, to cipher, to ride, to shoot. Lillian smiled at the memory. He said a frontier woman needed both sets of skills. Rosa laughed approvingly. I like your parents already. They raised strong daughters. By mid-afternoon, they'd finished the chores, and Rosa suggested they might want to freshen up the guest room. It doesn't get used much, she explained. Could use a woman's touch. As they worked, Lillian found herself curious about the ranch's owner. Rosa, you've known Virgil all his life. What was he like as a boy? Rosa smiled, her hands never stopping as she dusted a shelf. Full of life, always running, climbing, exploring, had a laugh that could fill the house. Her smile faded slightly. The war changed him like it changed so many boys. He went away at 19, came back at 22 with that scar and not much to say. Which war? Mary asked, sweeping the floor. The one they called the Spanish-American War, though it was fought more in Cuba than Spain, Rosa explained. Virgil joined the Rough Riders with Theodore Roosevelt. He doesn't speak of what happened there, but he came home different, quieter, more watchful. Lillian thought of the man who'd ridden through their ashes to offer help, who'd stood guard through the night to keep them safe. He seems kind, she ventured. Rosa's knowing gaze rested on her. He is that. Just needs reminding sometimes that life isn't all work and duty. She straightened a picture frame. His father was the same way after his mother died, worked himself into the grave trying to outrun his grief. Later, as the afternoon light began to soften toward evening, Lillian found herself on the porch, ostensibly to watch for Virgil's return but really to gather her thoughts. Their lives had changed so dramatically in just 2 days. What would tomorrow bring in Lordsburg? What kind of work could they find? Would it be enough to support them both? The sound of approaching hoofbeats pulled her from her worries. Virgil appeared on the horizon, but he wasn't alone. Another rider accompanied him, and behind them came a wagon. Lillian stood, shading her eyes against the setting sun. "Rosa," she called. "Virgil's back and he's brought company." Rosa emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well now, that's interesting." As the riders drew closer, Lillian could make out a man wearing a sheriff's badge alongside Virgil. The wagon was driven by a stout woman with iron-gray hair pinned severely beneath a bonnet. "Sheriff Matthews," Rosa identified the lawman. "And that's Abigail Hollister herself driving that wagon." My. Virgil reached the ranch first, dismounting with a nod to Lillian. "Miss Vance, hope you don't mind, but I brought some folks who wanted to meet you." Sheriff Matthews tipped his hat politely. "Madam, Virgil here told me about the raid on your homestead. I'm mighty sorry for your trouble." The wagon pulled up, and Mrs. Hollister climbed down with surprising agility for a woman of her years. "You must be the Vance girls," she said, her voice brisk but not unkind. "Virgil tells me you're in need of lodging and employment." Mary had joined them on the porch, her eyes wide at the new arrivals. Lillian put a protective arm around her sister's shoulders. "Yes, madam, we're hoping to find work in Lordsburg." Mrs. Hollister looked them up and down with an appraising eye. "Well, you appear healthy and strong." "I run a respectable establishment, mind you. No drinking, no gambling, no gentlemen callers in private rooms." "Yes, madam," Lillian said firmly. "We were raised properly." "So Virgil says." Mrs. Hollister's stern expression softened slightly. "He also mentioned you can bake a decent apple pie." Lillian shot a surprised glance at Virgil, who was suddenly very interested in adjusting his horse's reins. "I can, yes." "Good. My cook just left to get married, and I need someone to handle meals for my boarders. The younger one can help with cleaning and laundry." She named a modest but fair wage. Room and board included, of course. Lillian felt light-headed with relief. "That's very generous, Mrs. Hollister." "It's not charity," the older woman stated firmly. "It's business. I need help and you need work." She gestured to the wagon. "I've brought some things, clothes, necessities. Virgil said you lost everything." Sheriff Matthews stepped forward. "Miss Vance, I'd like to ask you some questions about the raiders if you're up to it. Any details might help us track them down." Rosa took charge then, ushering everyone into the house where she served coffee and the cake she and Lillian had baked that morning. As the adults discussed the raid and arrangements for the sisters, Lillian found herself watching Virgil. He sat slightly apart, contributing little to the conversation but missing nothing. Occasionally his eyes would meet hers, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of how quickly life could change. After the sheriff had taken Lillian's statement, promising to do everything possible to find the raiders, Mrs. Hollister announced it was time to return to town. "We should leave at first light tomorrow," she told the sisters. "I've got boarders expecting their meals." "We'll be ready," Lillian assured her. As the visitors prepared to depart, Virgil approached Lillian. "Mrs. Hollister is strict but fair," he said quietly. "You and your sister will be safe with her." "Thanks to you," Lillian replied. "I don't know how we can repay your kindness." Virgil shook his head. "No repayment necessary." He hesitated, then added, "Lordsburg's not far. I come to town for supplies regularly." Lillian felt a flutter in her chest at the implication that this wasn't goodbye. "We'd be happy to see a familiar face." Something like a smile touched his lips. "Then you will." He touched the brim of his hat and walked away to speak with the sheriff. After the visitors had gone, with plans made for the morning departure, Lillian found herself helping Rosa prepare dinner. The older woman worked in comfortable silence for a while before speaking. "Virgil rarely brings visitors here," she observed, "and I've never seen him ride all the way to town and back in one day unless it was an emergency." Lillian concentrated on slicing potatoes. "He was being kind." Rosa's tone was neutral but her eyes knowing. "Mrs. Hollister is a busy woman. For her to come out here personally instead of just sending word." She shrugged expressively. Virgil must have been quite persuasive. Before Lillian could respond, the man himself entered the kitchen, having just finished evening chores. "Something smells good," he said. "Lamb stew," Rosa informed him. Lillian made the dumplings. He glanced at Lillian, a flash of appreciation in his eyes. "You didn't have to cook, your guests." "I wanted to," Lillian replied. "It helps to stay busy." Dinner was a surprisingly comfortable affair. Mary, who had been mostly silent since the raid, began to talk more, asking Virgil questions about the ranch and his horses. He answered patiently, his deep voice warming as he described training Copper from a colt. "Maybe you could come back and visit sometimes," he told Mary. "See how the spring foals are coming along." "Could we?" Mary looked to Lillian with the first real enthusiasm she'd shown in days. "If Mrs. Hollister allows it, and if Mr. O'Malley doesn't mind," Lillian said carefully. "Virgil," he corrected, "and I don't mind. The ranch is only an hour's ride from town." After dinner, Rosa shooed everyone from her kitchen. Mary went upstairs to pack their few belongings, while Lillian found herself wandering out to the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the dark sky in breathtaking profusion. Virgil joined her, keeping a respectful distance. "Sky's something out here, isn't it?" he said. "Never got used to how many stars you can see." "It's beautiful," Lillian agreed. She turned to face him. "I wanted to thank you again, not just for taking us in, but for arranging everything with Mrs. Hollister. It's more than we could have hoped for." In the silver moonlight, his features seemed both stronger and gentler. "You would have managed without my help. You're capable." "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but it would have been much harder." She hesitated. "Why did you do it?" Truly, Virgil was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "When I came back from Cuba, I wasn't right. The things I'd seen done." He shook his head. "I couldn't sleep. Couldn't talk about it. Just wanted to be left alone." He leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the night. "One evening I was in a bad way, rode out alone, ended up lost in a thunderstorm. A family I'd never met took me in, dried me out, fed me, let me sleep in their barn. Didn't ask questions, didn't want payment." He turned to face her. "Small kindnesses matter out here. They can save a life." Lillian understood then that he was repaying a debt, passing forward the mercy shown to him. "Well, you've certainly saved ours," she said softly. "You would have found your way," he insisted. "But I'm glad I could help." He straightened. "I should check the horses once more. Early start tomorrow." "Good night, Virgil," she said, testing the sound of his name. He paused, something shifting in his expression. "Good night, Lillian." As he walked away, Lillian remained on the porch, watching the stars and wondering why leaving this place tomorrow felt so much like leaving home. Morning came with a flurry of activity. Rosa had packed food for their journey, and Virgil had hitched the wagon before dawn. Mary seemed excited about the adventure ahead, while Lillian felt a strange reluctance she tried to hide. As they prepared to depart, Rosa hugged them both. "You come visit an old woman sometimes," she insisted. "And if you ever need anything at all, you send word." Virgil helped them into the wagon, his hands strong and steady as he assisted Lillian. "Road's clear all the way to town," he told her. "Should take about an hour." "You're not coming with us?" Mary asked, disappointed. Got ranch work that can't wait, he explained, but I'll be in town soon enough for supplies. Lillian met his eyes. Thank you for everything, Virgil, he nodded once. Safe journey. As the wagon pulled away, Lillian looked back to see him standing outside the house, Rosa beside him, both watching until the wagon crested the hill and the ranch disappeared from view. Lordsburg was exactly as Lillian's father had described it, a growing town with a busy main street, false-fronted buildings, and all the dust and activity one would expect in a railroad hub. Mrs. Hollister's boarding house stood on a side street, an imposing two-story structure with neat curtains in the windows and a sign proclaiming respectable lodgings, no riff-raff. Home sweet home, Mrs. Hollister announced as she pulled the wagon to a stop. Not as grand as some, but clean and proper. The next few days passed in a whirl of activity as Lillian and Mary settled into their new roles. Lillian took charge of the kitchen, preparing 3 meals daily for the 12 boarders, mostly railroad men, a school teacher, and 2 elderly sisters who had lived there for years. Mary helped with cleaning and laundry, her natural cheerfulness returning as she found her place in this new life. Mrs. Hollister proved to be exactly as advertised, strict but fair. She inspected their work with an eagle eye but was quick with rare praise when deserved. After Lillian's first apple pie received compliments from every boarder, the older woman had nodded approvingly. "Virgil was right about your baking," she said. "Keep this up and I might have to raise your wages." 2 weeks passed without word from the Circle M ranch. Lillian told herself it was foolish to look up hopefully whenever the door opened, ridiculous to feel disappointment each time the visitor wasn't a tall cowboy with green eyes. She hardly knew the man, after all. Their connection had been brief, born of crisis and necessity. Yet she found herself thinking of him often, his quiet strength, the careful way he'd kept watch through the night, the unexpected gentleness in his voice when he spoke to Mary about horses. "You're burning the bread," Mrs. Hollister's voice broke into her thoughts one afternoon. Lillian gasped, pulling the loaf from the oven just in time. "I'm so sorry, I was distracted." The older woman raised an eyebrow. "I can see that, been happening a lot lately." She took a seat at the kitchen table. "Want to tell me what's on your mind, girl?" Lillian busied herself with the rescued bread. "Nothing important. Hum." Mrs. Hollister's tone was skeptical. "Wouldn't have anything to do with a certain rancher, would it? One who rode all the way to town just to make sure you and your sister were taken care of." Lillian felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. O'Malley was kind to help us, that's all." "Is it?" The older woman shook her head. "Girl, I've known Virgil O'Malley since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. Never known him to go out of his way like that for strangers. Never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you." Lillian nearly dropped the bread. "I don't know what you mean," Mrs. Hollister snorted. "Course you do. You're not blind." She stood, straightening her apron. "All I'm saying is, when that man finally shows up in town and he don't play coy. Life's too short out here for games." Before Lillian could formulate a response, Mary burst into the kitchen, her face alight with excitement. "Lily, the sheriff's back and he says they caught the raiders." Sheriff Matthews had indeed returned, gathering townspeople in the street to announce that the Benson gang had been apprehended across the border in Arizona. Among their possessions were items identified as belonging to the Vance family, including their father's pocket watch, which the sheriff personally returned to Lillian. "Can't bring back your home," he told her gruffly, "but thought you might want this." Lillian clutched the watch, tears stinging her eyes. "Thank you. This means more than I can say." As the crowd dispersed, Lillian noticed a familiar figure at the edge of the gathering, tall, broad-shouldered, watching from beneath the brim of a weather-beaten hat. Her heart leapt. "Virgil." He approached slowly, nodding to the sheriff as they passed. "Heard the news," he said. "Thought you'd want to know they found your cattle too. They're being held at the Ellis Ranch until you decide what to do with them." Lillian stared at him in disbelief. "Our cattle?" "But how branded?" he explained. "Your father's mark was registered with the territory. Once they caught the gang, it was just a matter of sorting out which animals belonged where." Mary joined them, her face lighting up at the sight of Virgil. "Mr. O'Malley, did you bring copper? You said I could meet the foals next time you came." A rare smile touched his lips. "He's hitched outside the mercantile, and I remember my promise, but that's up to your sister." Both turned expectant faces toward Lillian, who laughed despite herself. "I think Mrs. Hollister can spare us for an afternoon, especially with this news." She held up the watch. "They caught the men who did this, Virgil, and they found our cattle." Something in his expression softened. "I'm glad. It won't bring everything back, but it's something." "It's more than something," she said. "It's a beginning." 3 days later, Lillian found herself riding beside Virgil toward the Circle M, Mary chattering excitedly from the back of a gentle mare he'd brought specifically for her. The discovery of the Vance cattle, 28 head in total, had changed everything. Suddenly, the sisters had assets, something to build upon. "You could sell them," Virgil had suggested. "Use the money to start fresh in town. Buy a business, maybe." But Lillian had another idea, forming one that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She discussed it with Mary the night before, and now she wanted Virgil's opinion. As they approached the Circle M, Lillian felt a strange sense of homecoming. Rosa rushed out to greet them, enfolding both sisters in warm embraces before ushering everyone inside for refreshments. "You look better," she told Lillian approvingly. "Town life must agree with you." "Mrs. Hollister runs a good house," Lillian replied diplomatically, "and the work keeps us busy." While Mary went with Rosa to see the new foals, Lillian found herself alone with Virgil for the first time since leaving the ranch. They stood on the porch, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the yard. "There's something I wanted to discuss with you," Lillian began. Virgil turned to face her, his expression guarded but attentive. "I'm listening." "The cattle change things for us," she said. "Suddenly we have options we didn't have before," he nodded. "That's good. One option would be to sell them, as you suggested." She took a deep breath. "Another would be to start again. Rebuild," his eyebrows rose. "Rebuild your ranch. That's a lot of work for 2 women alone." "I know," she acknowledged. "It would be difficult, perhaps impossible." She looked out across his land, gathering courage. "But what if we didn't have to do it alone?" Virgil went very still. "What are you saying, Lillian?" She turned to face him directly. "The Circle M is a good ranch, but it's understocked. You told me yourself you've been wanting to expand but lack the capital." She swallowed hard. "What if we combined our resources? Your land, our cattle." "A partnership." For a long moment he said nothing, his face unreadable. Then carefully, "What kind of partnership did you have in mind?" Lillian's heart pounded. Mrs. Hollister's words echoed in her mind. "Life's too short out here for games." "The kind that lasts," she said softly. "The kind that builds something permanent." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like hope. "Lillian, are you saying—" "I'm saying I've thought about you every day since we left," she interrupted, the words tumbling out now. "I'm saying that in just 2 days, you and Rosa and this ranch felt more like home than anywhere I've been since my parents died. I'm saying that Mary adores you and she faltered. "You what?" he prompted, taking a step closer. She lifted her chin. "I think I could come to care for you very deeply, given time. And I think I hope you might feel the same." Virgil's expression transformed, the guardedness falling away to reveal a vulnerability that caught at her heart. "From the moment I saw you standing in the ashes of your home, I knew you were different," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Brave, determined. I couldn't stop thinking about you after you left." He took another step toward her. "I rode to town a dozen times these past weeks, but I always turned back before reaching the boarding house. Told myself you needed time to settle, that you wouldn't want reminders of the worst day of your life." "You weren't a reminder of the worst day," Lillian corrected him. "You were the beginning of something better." Slowly, giving her every chance to move away, Virgil reached for her hand. His calloused fingers closed gently around hers. "A partnership," he said thoughtfully. "Equal stakes in the future." "Equal stakes," she agreed. "Though we might need to negotiate the details." A smile, a real smile that reached his eyes, transformed his face. "I'm a fair negotiator." "I'm not," Lillian admitted, smiling back. "I drive a hard bargain." Virgil laughed then, the sound rusty but genuine. "I believe that." His expression sobered, though the warmth remained in his eyes. "This isn't how most folks would go about this." "I'm not most folks," Lillian replied. "And neither are you," he nodded slowly. "True enough." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Rosa would say we're putting the cart before the horse." "Rosa would understand that life is unpredictable," Lillian countered. "Sometimes you have to recognize an opportunity when it appears." Virgil studied her face. "Is that what I am? An opportunity?" "No," she said softly. "You're the man who rode through the ashes with me and my sister behind you, promising tomorrow over the hill. And you delivered on that promise." Something shifted in his expression, a decision made, a course set. "Lillian Vance," he said formally, "I'd be honored to enter into a partnership with you and your sister, both the business kind and the other kind, if you're sure." "I'm sure about the direction," she said honestly. "The details we can figure out together day by day." His free hand came up to cup her cheek. "Day by day sounds good to me." When he kissed her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, a confirmation of something that had been building since that first meeting in the smoke and dust. His lips were gentle against hers, a question rather than a demand, and Lillian answered by stepping closer, her hand coming to rest against his chest where she could feel the strong, steady beating of his heart. A delighted squeal broke them apart. Mary stood at the corner of the house, her hands clapped over her mouth, eyes dancing with joy. Behind her, Rosa wore a satisfied smile. "I knew it," Mary exclaimed. "I just knew it." Virgil didn't release Lillian's hand, though a flush colored his cheeks. "Your sister and I were discussing a business proposition," he said with dignity. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" Rosa muttered, making Mary giggle. Lillian squeezed Virgil's hand. "Actually, we were discussing several propositions. Mary, come sit with us. We need to talk about our future." As the four of them settled on the porch, Virgil outlined a plan. The Vance cattle would join the Circle M herd. The sisters would move to the ranch, with Mary continuing her education in Lordsburg until she finished school. In time, they would rebuild on the Vance property as well, expanding the operation to include both parcels of land. "And where do I fit into this grand plan?" Rosa asked, though her twinkling eyes suggested she already knew. "Right where you've always been," Virgil assured her. "Telling me when I'm being a fool and keeping this place running smoothly." "HMPH," Rosa sniffed, but her expression was pleased. "About time this house had a proper mistress again, and another young one to fuss over." As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the land that would now be their shared future, Lillian felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The past couldn't be erased, the loss of her parents, their home, the violence that had thrust her and Mary into this new path, but looking at Virgil's profile against the sunset, she knew with certainty that the future held promise. Later, After a celebratory dinner during which even Virgil talked more than usual, he and Lillian walked along the creek that ran through the property. The evening was warm, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "It won't be easy," he said suddenly. "Ranching never is. Drought, disease, hard winters. There's always something." "I know," she replied. "I grew up on a ranch, remember?" He nodded. "Just want to be sure you understand what you're getting into with the ranch and with me." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "I'm not an easy man, Lillian. The war left marks that don't show. Sometimes I don't sleep. Sometimes I can't find words." She reached up to trace the scar along his jaw. "We all have scars, Virgil. Some show, some don't. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for real." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Real, I can promise." "That's enough," she said simply. 2 months later, on a clear autumn morning, Lillian Vance became Lillian O'Malley in a small ceremony at the Circle M Ranch. Mrs. Hollister had closed her boarding house for the day to attend, bringing half of Lordsburg with her. Sheriff Matthews gave the bride away, and Mary served as her sister's maid of honor, beaming in a new blue dress that matched her eyes. Rosa had outdone herself preparing the wedding feast, and the yard was filled with tables and chairs borrowed from the church. Virgil, uncomfortable in a new suit but handsome nonetheless, kept his bride close at his side throughout the celebration, his eyes rarely leaving her face. "Never thought I'd see the day," Sheriff Matthews commented as he helped himself to another slice of Rosa's cake. Virgil O'Malley, married and smiling. "Will wonders never cease?" "Hush, you old goat," Mrs. Hollister scolded. Anyone with eyes could see it was meant to be from the moment he brought those girls to town. As the afternoon waned, guests gradually departed, leaving the new family to settle into their first evening together. Mary helped Rosa clear away the remnants of the feast, both pretending not to notice when Virgil led Lillian away for a private moment. They walked to the hilltop overlooking the ranch, the same hill they'd crested on that first journey when Virgil had brought the sisters to safety. Below them stretched the Circle M, now thriving with the addition of the Vance cattle and the energy Lillian had brought to the operation. "Mrs. O'Malley," Virgil said, testing the name with evident satisfaction. "Has a good sound to it." Lillian leaned against his side, his arm coming naturally around her shoulders. "It does, though I'm still getting used to it." "We have time," he replied, dropping a kiss on the top of her head. "All the time we need." She tilted her face up to his. "Do you ever think about how easily we might never have met if you hadn't seen the smoke that day?" "I don't believe that," he said with surprising certainty. "I think some things are meant to happen one way or another." His arms tightened around her. "I'd have found you somehow." As they stood together watching the sunset paint the land in shades of gold and crimson, Lillian thought of the ashes they had literally and figuratively ridden through to reach this moment. From the worst day of her life had come the best: a new family, a new purpose, a love she hadn't been looking for but now couldn't imagine living without. "What are you thinking?" Virgil asked. Lillian smiled, tucking the memory away to share with their children and grandchildren in years to come the story of how their family began, how hope had waited just over the hill when all seemed lost. "I'm thinking that tomorrow is here," she said simply. "And it's beautiful." 5 years later, Lillian sat on the same porch where she'd first proposed their partnership, watching Virgil teach their 3-year-old son Thomas to ride his first pony. Mary, home from her studies at the teaching college in Santa Fe, sat beside her, both women laughing as the little boy bounced excitedly in the saddle. "He's got your determination," Mary observed, "and Virgil's way with horses." "And your ability to wrap us all around his finger," Lillian replied, resting a hand on her swelling abdomen where their second child grew. The Circle M had prospered beyond their expectations. The merger with the rebuilt Vance property had created one of the most successful ranches in the territory. Mary had discovered a passion for education and would soon be teaching in the Lordsburg school, though she kept a room at the ranch that would always be hers. Rosa, though slowing down, still ruled the kitchen and doted shamelessly on Thomas. She'd already begun knitting blankets for the new baby, declaring that this one would surely be a girl. Virgil had changed too, in subtle but significant ways. He smiled more, spoke more, though he would never be a man of excessive words. The nightmares that had plagued him after the war had gradually diminished, and if some nights he still woke restless, Lillian was always there to walk with him under the stars until peace returned. "Mama, look," Thomas called, sitting tall in the saddle as Virgil led the pony in a circle. "I riding." "I see you, sweetheart," she called back. "You're doing wonderfully." Virgil looked up, meeting her eyes across the yard, his expression holding all the love and partnership they'd built together day by day, challenge by challenge, joy by joy. Later that evening, after Thomas was asleep and Mary had retired to her room with a book, Lillian and Virgil sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge. His hand rested protectively on her belly, where the new life occasionally kicked against his palm. "I never thought I could be this happy," he said quietly. "After the war, I figured this kind of life wasn't meant for me." Lillian leaned her head against his shoulder, "And I never imagined finding love in the ashes of my old life." She placed her hand over his. "Do you remember what you told me that night on this porch when I asked why you'd helped us? That small kindnesses matter," he recalled. "That they can save a life." She nodded. "You saved ours. Not just by taking us in, but by showing us there was still good in the world when we needed to believe that most." Virgil turned to face her, his expression serious. "You saved me too, Lil. I was existing, not living, going through the motions." His voice roughened. "You and Mary brought life back to this place. To me." As they sat together in the gathering darkness, the future stretched before them bright with promise, secure in the foundation they'd built together from the ruins of their separate pasts. Tomorrow wasn't just over the hill anymore. It was here, in this home they'd created, in the family they'd formed, in the love that had blossomed in the most unexpected circumstances. And when Virgil kissed her beneath the vast canopy of stars, Lillian knew with absolute certainty that riding through those ashes 5 years ago had not been an ending but a beginning, the first steps on a journey that would continue day by day, for all the tomorrows yet to come.